What's up, Movement Masters? Shawn, Myszka, Movement Master, and OptimizeMovement.com coming to you with another Shawn's Q&A. And today's question comes from Ray. It is, I know that you're always talking about analyzing numerous aspects of movement and looking for ways to develop each one of them. When you break down open sport movements, what do you find is the most overlooked movement quality? Hopefully this makes sense what I'm trying to ask, and I'm just trying to continue looking at things from your perspective. First off, hey Ray, I think it does make some sense what you're trying to ask here, and I do think it's a great question. And it's something, in my opinion, that all sport movement specialists should be thinking about as well as we look to address certain movement qualities and abilities in our athletes' preparation plans. For starters, I'm going to take a little bit of a cop-out here and begin with a caveat by simply saying that the most important movement quality or the most important movement component of a particular movement solution is going to be dependent on the particular sport movement problem. You know, what I mean by this is every movement problem is going to present unique task and environmental constraints which are going to combine to greatly influence the importance of different aspects of the human movement system, namely factors of the brain and its cognitive processing, the behaviors and its sensory perceptual system, and the resultant biomechanics. Additionally, per the dynamical systems theory, which we've talked about numerous times here before, we know that every athlete, of course, will bring a unique set of constraints themselves to the problem, and then their further organization of a solution to that movement problem. Thus, this constant interaction between those three constraints then will mean that the importance of given movement qualities will be unique and specific to the particular context of the movement problem. That all said there, I'm going to do my best to make some general blanket statements here that can apply to all circumstances and hopefully attempt to answer your question. So, if I had to put myself out on a pedestal and say something in regards to the most overlooked movement quality during both analysis by sport movement by professionals, as well as then during drill or task prescription, I would have to personally say that the attentional focus of the athlete during the sport movement task is the one that I find that most movement professionals simply don't spend enough time on. And I say this for a few reasons. First, when people, movement professionals included, will watch sport movement, we often find ourselves fixating on the biomechanics that are produced during the activity. And this is really fine and dandy because it's the biomechanics that we all see being displayed and that are more easily evaluated or clearly evaluated based on efficiency and effectiveness. But in my mind, there is a problem here with this approach. When we look at motor control and movement performance, we can't truly produce a given action or movement without first perceiving or taking in information. Information from the environment, information about how we must perform that task. Thus, as movement professionals, we really can't start to judge an athlete's biomechanical efficiency without looking at it as a part of a greater whole of the biodynamic structure of that movement solution, or of the action selected or performed based on the athlete's perception of that information that's being gathered by him or her. Secondly, we should be able to acknowledge that the most masterful of mover, the most masterfully skilled movers in most open environment sports situations are not always the ones who just produce the most effective movements. Instead, they're almost always the ones who are most effective at analyzing the environmental information that's at hand in order to understand the particular problem that's specific to that context. And then, only then, can they really make the most informed decision for action based on that relevant information that they just took in. In fact, numerous studies over the last few decades have really illustrated this point. We have found that the more experienced and more proficient athletes will pick up entirely different aspects of the same information in comparison to their less skilled counterparts and peers. Thus, these athletes are going to extract different types of information much more rapidly, while also fixating their visual gauge much differently and scanning different things for different lengths of time. Essentially, they're making greater use, the skilled performer is making greater use of their vision and of their attention to monitor their ever-changing environment of sport in order to make decisions more appropriately than their peers. And that comes way before the correct biomechanical execution. And obviously here, a skilled performer will also have more task-specific knowledge then to go along with the differences in their attentional focus. But I think this begins to point some answers to your question. Additionally, on this point, I often speak in presentations about the fact that all of us as human beings, for the most part, have access to similar information. It's just that the elite performer will really truly have developed the ability to sense and perceive the right information at the right time and use it in the right ways to contribute to the control and the coordination of the movement solutions most appropriately. Thus, let's take a look at how most movement professionals will structure practice activities and practice drills and training exercises. We find that most are focused in on a rehearsal and evaluation of the athlete's biomechanics during the drill, and they leave it at that. And some of this is because some of the issues that we already pointed out, as it's not so clear usually what the athlete is focusing their attention on, let alone how or what they are perceiving as that given input or as the stimulus for action. So it's harder for us to truly distinguish ways to develop this quality of the movement solution. And as movement professionals then, the biggest thing that we can do to ensure that we're not part of that problem and that we ourselves do not overlook it like so many others in the field is namely begin to ensure that we are not diluting the informational constraints too much during practice activities and drills. Meaning, we must make sure during our practice design that we're incorporating enough drills which use action after a stimuli instead of a predominance of pre-planned or predetermined movement actions that the athlete has awareness of prior to the start of the drill. Additionally, when we do use stimuli, we should try to match that specific stimuli that the athlete will be required to read, recognize, and then react to when playing within their sport. Thus, though some means of adding contextual interference are great, such as using word or color associations during the use of reactive agility, calling a certain color out or direction or, pointing a direction or something like that, or using a word association to mean a certain zone or area. That's all fine and dandy, but the more we can use a live opponent stimuli who behaves much more like the sport movement context will offer, the more we're going to be able to truly develop this learner's attention and further perception in the proper ways that we can expect to be displayed in the sport. So hopefully here, I was able to point you in the right direction, Ray, and I think all in all, it was a great question. But hopefully those directions that I pointed you in are some usable ones for your own athletes and in your own craft to really start to look at movement solutions in a much different way and put the connection between the brain, the behaviors, and the biomechanics. So for another Shawn's Q&A, this has been Shawn Myszka, Movement Master and OptimizeMovement.com. I'll talk to you guys on the flip side, and until then, let's continue to master the art of optimizing movement.